The great neutral planet of Zathari Prime orbited a dying star, its skies painted in perpetual hues of gold and violet. This remote world, devoid of its own intelligent life, had become a symbol of compromise among the galaxy's many warring species. Its untouched beauty served as a reminder of what was at stake: peace, fragile and fleeting, but precious enough to draw ancient enemies to its surface for yet another attempt at reconciliation. Inside the grand crystalline dome of the Galactic Accord Chamber, tension was palpable. Rows of shimmering seats, each custom designed to accommodate the diverse physiology of its alien occupants, surrounded a circular negotiation table. At this table, representatives of the Crethon Empire and the Azylorite Dominion faced one another with barely restrained hostility. Between them sat a hulking AI mediator, a machine of cold precision, its many lenses flickering as it processed every word, gesture, and pulse of emotion in the room. This was the 23rd attempt to broker peace between these two species. No one held much hope for success. The Crethons were a reptilian race, their leathery skin marked by centuries of evolution in the harsh deserts of their homeworld. Ambassador Galarek, a towering figure with a jagged crest of horns, spoke in the guttural tones of his native tongue. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously by the AI. We have sacrificed too much to entertain the pretense of diplomacy any longer. The Xylorites have proven themselves treacherous at every turn. This farce ends now. Across the table, Ambassador Thal Arn of the Xylorites remained motionless. Her species, known for their luminous, almost ethereal appearance, projected an aura of calm that belied the sharpness of their minds. Her translucent body pulsed faintly with bioluminescent energy, and when she spoke, her voice resonated as if carried on a distant breeze. It is the Crethons who have betrayed trust, not us. We extended the hand of peace, and they repaid us with sabotage. A murmur rippled through the audience of onlookers, a mix of diplomats, observers, and military advisors from across the galaxy. Among them sat Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, a human cadet barely out of the Galactic Academy. His presence here was more symbolic than functional, a nod to humanity's growing participation in interstellar politics. Marcus was a quiet observer, his plain military uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garb of the other delegates. To most in the room, he was invisible. Marcus watched the exchange with a sinking feeling in his gut. The pattern was all too familiar: accusations, counter-accusations, and escalating rhetoric. The peace talks had barely begun, and already they were teetering on the edge of collapse. He had spent weeks studying the histories of the Crethon-Xylorite conflict, poring over reports of battles fought and treaties broken. The bloodshed between these two races spanned centuries, and the animosity ran deeper than any outsider could fully grasp. The AI mediator intervened, its synthesized voice cutting through the tension. "Ambassadors, please. The purpose of this meeting is to foster understanding and resolve grievances. Let us not descend into recrimination." But neither side was willing to yield. Galarek slammed a clawed fist on the table, his eyes blazing with fury. "Understanding? There can be no understanding with those who slaughter our people under the guise of truce." Thal Arn's glow intensified, a sign of her growing agitation. "You dare speak of slaughter, Crethon? Your kind poisoned our water supplies, condemning entire colonies to death." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices as other delegates began to weigh in, some defending one side, others the other. Marcus remained silent, his mind racing. He had no official role here, no authority to speak, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all spiraling out of control. His training had taught him to analyze conflicts from every angle, to seek patterns and connections that others might overlook. And now, as he listened to the back-and-forth accusations, something about the AI's translations caught his attention. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but there was a nuance missing in Galarek's statement, a specific term in the Crethon language that carried cultural significance. The AI's translation rendered it as sacrifice, but Marcus knew enough about Crethon linguistics to recognize that the word also implied gift. In the context of Crethon diplomacy, this distinction could mean the difference between an insult and an olive branch. His pulse quickened. Could it be that Galarek's statement had been misinterpreted, inflaming tensions unnecessarily? Marcus glanced at the AI mediator, its lenses still flickering as it worked to keep up with the heated exchange. The machine was advanced, but no algorithm was infallible. The thought gnawed at him, what if this entire confrontation was being fueled by a simple error in translation? The debate grew louder, more volatile. Delegates shouted over one another, and even the AI struggled to restore order. Marcus clenched his fists, torn between his duty to remain a passive observer and his instinct to act. He glanced at his datapad, where the transcripts of the discussion were being logged in real time. He quickly pulled up the Krethan term in question, cross-referencing it with his linguistic notes. The pieces fell into place. Galarek's phrasing, far from being a declaration of hostility, was a subtle acknowledgement of Xylerite losses, a gesture of respect, however begrudging. But the AI's mistranslation had stripped it of this meaning, presenting it instead as an accusation. Marcus knew he couldn't sit idly by. The room was moments away from erupting into chaos, and if this peace summit failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cutting through the din. All eyes turned to him, the lone human cadet standing amidst a sea of alien dignitaries. The weight of their scrutiny was almost overwhelming, but Marcus held his ground. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of the AI's processors. Galarek and Thal Aaron both fixed him with piercing gazes, their expressions unreadable. Marcus took a deep breath and continued. Ambassador Galarek's statement was mistranslated. The term he used, Vorthanak, does not mean sacrifice in the accusatory sense. In Krethan culture, it also means gift. I believe he was acknowledging the Xylerite losses, not condemning them. A ripple of surprise spread through the room. The AI mediator quickly recalibrated, analyzing Marcus's claim. Correction noted, it intoned. Ambassador Galarek's statement has been amended for accuracy. Thal Aaron's glow dimmed slightly as she processed this revelation. "Is this true, Galarek?" The Krethan ambassador hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. "Yes, I did not intend offense." The tension in the room eased, if only slightly. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew the hard part was yet to come. This was only the first step in a long and delicate process. As he sat back down, the murmurs of the delegates grew louder, their conversations now tinged with curiosity about the human cadet who had dared to intervene. For the first time, Marcus realized the weight of his actions. He had drawn attention to himself, and in the intricate web of galactic politics, that could be both a blessing and a curse. The ripple effect of Lieutenant Marcus Hayes' intervention echoed through the chamber like a silent storm. The human cadet, who had stepped forward to clarify a crucial mistranslation, was now the center of attention in a room filled with beings who had lived centuries longer and wielded incomprehensible power. Yet Marcus was neither relieved nor reassured. He was keenly aware that his actions, though necessary, had set him on a path fraught with uncertainty. The Galactic Accord Chamber, a grand testament to unity, had transformed into a quieter, more contemplative space. Delegates murmured among themselves, their gazes flitting between the Krethan ambassador, the Xylerite envoy, and the human cadet. The AI mediator, its sleek metallic body humming faintly, had recalibrated its linguistic database, and its synthesized voice echoed throughout the chamber. "The mistranslation has been corrected. Delegates, we may proceed." Ambassador Galarek of the Krethan Empire, his jagged crest of horns casting sharp shadows on the crystalline table, leaned forward. His eyes, gleaming like molten gold, studied Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and restrained hostility. "Human," he began, his guttural voice resonating. "You claim to understand our language better than the AI. Do you presume to correct the tools of the Galactic Accord itself?" Marcus swallowed hard, acutely aware that every word he spoke from this moment on would shape his fate. He straightened his posture, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "No presumption, Ambassador. I only observed a cultural nuance that the AI, advanced as it is, might have overlooked. My intention was not to interfere but to prevent an escalation that could harm all parties." Galarek's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Across the table, Ambassador Thal Aran of the Izyrite Dominion tilted her translucent head, her bioluminescence dimming and brightening in a rhythm that Marcus had come to recognize as contemplation. Her voice, ethereal and melodic, broke the silence. "You have studied Krethon linguistics and culture, Lieutenant Hayes?" "I have, Ambassador," Marcus replied, his tone respectful but firm. "As part of my training at the Galactic Academy. Humanity is new to the galactic stage, and we've made it a priority to learn from other species. Understanding your histories and traditions is critical to building trust." The Azalorite envoy's glow softened, a sign of tentative approval. "Then perhaps this human perspective is precisely what this summit requires. For too long, our attempts at diplomacy have been mired in our respective grievances. A neutral viewpoint may offer clarity." This unexpected endorsement sent a murmur through the chamber. Marcus felt the weight of countless eyes upon him, some intrigued, others skeptical, a few outright hostile. He glanced at the other human delegates seated in the observation rows, their expressions a mix of astonishment and concern. None of them had expected him, a cadet with no formal role, to step into the spotlight. Before anyone could object, Thal Aran gestured toward Marcus. "Lieutenant Hayes, since you have demonstrated an understanding of Krethon culture, I propose you offer your insights on the current impasse. Perhaps you can identify a path forward." Marcus's breath caught. This was not what he had anticipated. He had only intended to clarify a mistranslation, not position himself as a mediator in one of the galaxy's most volatile conflicts. Yet, as he looked around the room at the tense faces of the delegates, the flickering lenses of the AI, and the wary but expectant gazes of Galorek and Thal Aran, he realized that this was an opportunity he could not ignore. He rose slowly, his mind racing to piece together everything he knew about the Krethon-Xylarate conflict. Decades of war had left both sides scarred, their grievances deeply entrenched. The Krethons, a proud and territorial species, valued honor above all else, while the Azalorites, known for their intellect and adaptability, prioritized survival and strategy. Both cultures were fiercely independent, yet they shared a history of trade and cooperation that had once flourished before descending into bloodshed. "Ambassadors," Marcus began, his voice firm but measured. "The mistranslation we encountered earlier is emblematic of the larger issue at hand. This summit, like those before it, is hindered by miscommunication, not just linguistic but cultural. You both speak of betrayal and loss, yet these words carry different weights in your respective languages and traditions. Until we address these disparities, true understanding will remain out of reach." He paused, gauging their reactions. Galorek's expression was inscrutable, while Thal Aran's glow pulsed faintly. Encouraged, Marcus pressed on. "During my studies, I learned of the ancient trade accords between your two civilizations. These agreements were built on mutual respect and a recognition of each other's strengths. I propose we revisit this foundation not as a means to relive the past, but to build a future rooted in cooperation." A low murmur rippled through the delegates. The AI mediator's lenses flickered, processing Marcus's words. Proposal noted. "Ambassadors, your responses?" Galorek's claws tapped rhythmically on the table, a sound that echoed ominously. Finally he spoke. "You suggest that we, the Krethons, should extend trust to those who have betrayed us? You presume much, human." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I do not presume, Ambassador. I suggest that trust must be earned, and that the first step toward earning it is understanding. If we continue to view each other solely through the lens of past grievances, we will never break the cycle of conflict." Thal Aran's voice, cool and measured, interjected. "And how do you propose we achieve this understanding, Lieutenant? Words alone cannot heal the wounds we carry." Marcus hesitated, aware that his next words would define the course of the summit. "Not words alone, Ambassador. Actions. I propose an exchange not of territory or resources, but of culture. Each side offers something of deep significance to the other, a gesture of goodwill that cannot be misinterpreted." The chamber fell silent. Galorek's crest flared slightly, a sign of agitation. "You speak of symbols, human. Symbols do not rebuild colonies or resurrect the dead." "No," Marcus agreed, but they can lay the foundation for reconciliation. A gesture, however small, can signal a willingness to move forward. Without that willingness, no treaty will hold. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Marcus could feel the weight of every breath, every glance. Then, to his astonishment, Thal Arn inclined her head. "There is wisdom in your words, Lieutenant. The Xylarite Dominion is prepared to consider such an exchange provided the Crethon Empire reciprocates." All eyes turned to Galarek. The Crethon ambassador's claws stilled, his gaze fixed on Marcus. For a moment the silence stretched so thin it seemed it might shatter. Then, with a reluctant nod, Galarek spoke. "We will consider the proposal. But understand this, human, if this exchange fails, the blood will be on your hands." Marcus exhaled, the tension in his chest easing slightly. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for now, the summit was back on track. As he returned to his seat, the AI mediator announced a recess, giving the delegates time to deliberate. For Marcus, the momentary reprieve felt both a victory and a warning. The galaxy was watching, and the stakes had never been higher. The recess brought a semblance of calm to the chamber, but Marcus Hayes felt anything but relaxed. As the delegates dispersed to their respective quarters, the weight of his proposal lingered heavily on his shoulders. The young human cadet, who had no official standing in the negotiations, was now the unlikely architect of a potential path to peace between two of the galaxy's most powerful and antagonistic factions. He knew the odds were against him. History had shown that neither the Crethons nor the Xylarites were inclined toward compromise, and even a minor misstep could reignite their centuries-old conflict. Marcus spent the brief recess reviewing his notes, meticulously cross-referencing cultural artifacts and historical texts from both civilizations. If the exchange he had proposed was to succeed, it would need to resonate deeply with both sides. The Crethons valued honor and the preservation of tradition, while the Azalarites prized intellect and adaptability. Finding a symbolic gesture that bridged these fundamental differences would not be easy. As the recess ended and the delegates returned to the chamber, the atmosphere was markedly different. Conversations were subdued, the air charged with a mix of cautious hope and lingering skepticism. Marcus noticed that both Ambassador Galarek and Ambassador Thal Arn seemed more subdued, their earlier hostility tempered by the gravity of the situation. Even the ever-neutral AI mediator seemed to project a sense of anticipation as it announced the resumption of the summit. "The Galactic Accord Summit will now reconvene," the AI intoned. "Ambassadors, have you had time to consider Lieutenant Hayes' proposal?" Galarek, his imposing figure dominating the Crethon delegation, was the first to speak. His voice, deep and resonant, carried an edge of reluctance. "The Crethon Empire is willing to entertain the idea of a cultural exchange, though we remain skeptical of its efficacy. Words and symbols are fleeting. We require assurance that this gesture will hold weight." Thal Arn, her translucent form pulsing faintly, responded with the measured tone characteristic of these Xylarites. "The Dominion echoes these concerns. While we are open to the concept, the exchange must be substantive and mutually meaningful. Lieutenant Hayes, you have proposed this path. What specifically do you suggest?" All eyes turned to Marcus. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as he rose to address the chamber. "Ambassadors, I have spent the recess examining the histories and traditions of your civilizations. The Crethon Empire's Ardent Blades and the Asylarite Dominion's Luminar Codex are among the most revered artifacts of your cultures. Both represent the pinnacle of your respective values, honor and intellect." A murmur spread through the chamber as the delegates exchanged uncertain glances. The Ardent Blades were ceremonial weapons, each forged from the sacred metals of the Crethon homeworld and passed down through generations as symbols of valor and sacrifice. The Luminar Codex, on the other hand, was an ancient repository of Xylarite knowledge, a crystalline artifact that contained the collective wisdom of their greatest scholars. Marcus continued, his voice gaining confidence. "I propose that each side offer one of these artifacts to the other as a gesture of goodwill. The Crethons would present an Ardent Blade to the Azalarites, symbolizing a willingness to extend the honor of their traditions. In return, the Xylarites would present a fragment of the Luminar Codex to the Crethons, signifying a shared commitment to enlightenment and progress. The room fell silent. Even the AI mediator paused, its lenses flickering, as it processed the implications of Marcus's proposal. The delegates' expressions ranged from intrigue to outright disbelief. Galarek's claws tapped rhythmically on the table, a sign of his inner turmoil, while Thal Arn's glow dimmed as she pondered the weight of the suggestion. Finally, Galarek spoke, his voice heavy with skepticism. "You ask much of us, human. The Arden Blades are not mere ornaments. They are the essence of our identity, forged in the fires of our ancestors. To part with one is to part with a piece of our soul." Thal Arn's response was equally measured, and the Luminar Codex is more than a repository of knowledge. It is a living testament to our collective consciousness. To fragment it is to fragment it is to fragment ourselves. Marcus nodded, acknowledging their concerns. "I understand what I'm asking. This exchange is not meant to diminish your heritage but to honor it. By offering these artifacts, you acknowledge the value of each other's strengths. It's a declaration that peace is worth the sacrifice." The chamber held its collective breath as the two ambassadors deliberated. The stakes were clear. If either side rejected the proposal, the summit would almost certainly fail, and the galaxy would plunge back into war. After what felt like an eternity, Thal Arn broke the silence. Her voice, soft but resolute, carried the weight of her decision. "The Xylarite Dominion accepts this proposal. We will offer a fragment of the Luminar Codex to the Crethon Empire as a gesture of trust and mutual respect." All eyes turned to Galarek, who remained silent for several agonizing moments. Finally he rose, his massive form casting a shadow over the table. His voice was steady but tinged with a note of defiance. "The Crethon Empire will reciprocate. An Arden Blade shall be presented to the Xylarites. Let this exchange mark the beginning of a tentative peace." A wave of relief swept through the chamber. The AI mediator, its lenses glowing brightly, announced the decision. "The cultural exchange has been agreed upon. Details of the transfer will be arranged following the summit. This marks a historic step toward reconciliation between the Crethon Empire and the Xylarite Dominion." Marcus sank back into his seat, the weight of the moment crashing over him. He had done it. Against all odds, he had brokered an agreement that could change the course of galactic history. But as the delegates began to applaud, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The aftermath of the summit was swift and far-reaching. News of the cultural exchange spread across the galaxy, hailed as a breakthrough in diplomacy. Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight, celebrated as a hero by some and scrutinized by others. The Galactic Council summoned him to a formal hearing, where he was commended for his initiative, but also warned of the complexities he had unleashed. For the Crethons and Xylarites, the exchange of artifacts was a moment of profound significance. The Arden Blade, displayed in the Xylarite capital, became a symbol of courage and unity, while the fragment of the Luminar Codex, enshrined in a Crethon temple, inspired new generations to seek wisdom over warfare. As Marcus returned to Earth, his thoughts were a whirlwind of pride, uncertainty, and resolve. He had proven that humanity could contribute meaningfully to the galaxy, but he also knew that the road to lasting peace would be long and fraught with challenges. The summit was just the first step, and Marcus Hayes, the human cadet who had dared to speak, was ready to take the next. The story ends with Marcus standing on a balcony overlooking Earth's bustling cities, a quiet smile on his face. The stars above seemed a little closer, a little brighter, and for the first time he felt the stirrings of hope for humanity and for the galaxy.